This universal newsreel looks back at the events of 1953, from the inauguration of President Eisenhower, the death of Stalin, to the catastrophes that took place all over the world during that year.
For Americans was a year of change. It saw soldier statesman Dwight D. Eisenhower take the oath of office as the nation's first Republican president in 20 years and receive the good wishes of his predecessor, Harry S. Truman. The new chief executive took the reins of government at a climactic moment in the country's history, when the solution of foreign and domestic problems pressed for early decision. With a resounding political victory behind him, he faced them with confidence. Early, however, in his term, he suffered the loss of a wise counselor and ally, for death came to Robert A. Taft, known as Mr. Republican, and one of the nation's most respected leaders. His passing was mourned by all political groups. Joseph Stalin, the most powerful dictator in history, also passed from the scene, dealing world communism a heavy blow and opening a struggle for power among leaders in the Kremlin. America forged ahead in the lead in the atomic arms race. Its first piece of atomic artillery was successfully tested, hurling its atom warhead 20 miles. The atom had been harnessed for ground warfare, and a new chapter in ordnance had been written in the now familiar towering, billowing, and sinister mushroom cloud, trademark of the atomic explosion. Several of these guns already form a part of the armament of the Western European Defense Army. The year also reveals some cracks in Iron Curtain armor, with bloody riots staged by East Germans, riots which at times assumed the proportions of a revolt. Attempts by German Reds to infiltrate the West were met by savage opposition. Much of the unrest was engendered by food shipments to undernourished East Germans, which Red police and troops sought to keep from the patient thousands who braved the Red wrath. In Europe's troubled pattern, Trieste loomed large, as the conflict between Italy and Yugoslavia for the historic Adriatic area brought the massing of troops on both sides of the border. Trieste itself for weeks was the scene of rioting after the intention of the United States and Britain to withdraw their occupation troops was announced. Year's end, however, saw comparative peace established, but with Trieste still remaining a thorny problem to be solved. Nature ran wild all across the globe. America's Southwest experienced the worst drought since the grim days of the Dust Bowl era. Millions of acres of farmland were seared by the blazing sun, parched by lack of rain. President Eisenhower and Agriculture Secretary Benson met with governors of 6 stricken states to plan drought relief for thousands of hard-hit farmers. Across the Atlantic, too much water was the trouble, as the worst North Sea storms in centuries battered the coastline and breached the dikes of Holland. Thousands of square miles ages ago wrested from the sea were reconquered by the surging waters, a disaster that ruined some of the richest farmland in West Europe and presaged years of hardship for the people of the Low Countries, years of deprivation and arduous toil needed to win back the land from the grip of the sea. The floods took a bitter cost and material destruction, a fearful toll in human life and suffering. Earthquakes struck the fabled Ionian Isles of Greece, bringing terror and destruction in their wake. For days the earth shook. Rescue and relief forces were on the scene before the temblors stopped, but little could avail against the awesome might of the very earth run amok. Hundreds perished in the ruins, and thousands were injured as entire towns toppled. In Japan, a C-124 transport crashed on takeoff, killing 129 U.S. servicemen when it exploded and burned on impact. The worst disaster in air history. It was a grim milestone in the 50th anniversary year of aviation. Tornadoes slashed across the country, cutting a swath of destruction in a great arc from Texas through the Midwest and New England to Canada. Their savage power splintered trees, crushed buildings as with a mighty fist, tossed automobiles about with careless whim. The tornadoes wreaked havoc in one of the worst storm years on record. Historic Westminster Abbey in London, scene of colorful pomp and ceremony of empire. A bright spot in the year came with the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II. The hopes and hearts of England and the Commonwealth went out to a young queen and to her husband, Duke Philip of Edinburgh. seeing in a second Elizabeth a revival of the glories and prestige that were England's in the days of the first Elizabethan era. A storybook queen who wrote bright pages in the story of the year. Uneasy peace, but peace withal, came to Korea in 1953. The end of 3 years of bitter conflict and the end of bondage for prisoners of the Reds. What lay ahead, no one could foretell at year's end, but for these men, at least, the shadow of death had lifted. They were alive in Freedom Village and going home. The signing of the truce took place at Panmunjom, first step on the long and still tortuous road to ultimate solution of peace and a unified Korea. Signing for the United Nations was American General William Harrison, for the Reds, North Korea's Nam Il. But the hopes kindled this day faded as the year ran out. Many a ship sailed into many a U.S. port, bringing war-weary veterans of Korea back home again, and many were the scenes of rejoicing and reunion. The months and years of wondering and waiting fell away on days such as these, and the heart was filled to overflowing. Men who had fought for liberty were welcomed back into her arms in 1953, fateful year of transition.